Every mystery has a voice. Few dare to listen.
Blackthorn Hall had the sort of darkness which seemed less a failure of the moon than a deliberate decision on the part of the house. Its chimneys stood against the Norfolk sky like blackened fingers, while the rain made a patient examination of every window. Lord Peter Wimsey arrived shortly before midnight, when the household had already acquired that peculiar silence which descends upon respectable houses after a violent death. Before he entered, he paused beneath the porch, looked up at the mullioned windows, and observed that murder, unlike architecture, was generally improved by being kept out of sight. And, before we proceed, tell us where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. Put it in the comments. It is always curious to discover how many people are keeping company with a country house murder at an hour when sensible persons are asleep. Inspector Harold Bell opened the door. Lord Peter, Inspector, you have the look of a man who has been obliged to explain murder to a housekeeper. I have had to explain considerably more than that. Then I have arrived at an opportune moment. Bell did not smile. Wimsey had not expected him to. Blackthorn Hall belonged to the late Dr. Edmund Vail, a celebrated authority on handwriting and disputed documents. Vail had spent 40 years deciding whether dead men had written things they were supposed to have written, and whether living men had written things they very much wished to have been written by somebody else. It was, Wimsey reflected, an occupation requiring either great patience or an unusually forgiving opinion of humanity. The body lay in the study. The room was long, high-ceilinged, and lined with books. A green-shaded lamp burned upon the desk, illuminating papers, 2 open books, an inkstand, and a bronze paperweight shaped like a small crouching hound. Beyond the desk, rain whispered against the window. Dr. Vail sat collapsed beside his chair. His silver hair was undisturbed. His spectacles had fallen onto the carpet. There was a dark mark at the side of his head. Wimsey approached without touching anything. Time? Body discovered at 9:56, said Bell. Doctor thinks death occurred perhaps 10 minutes earlier. Possibly 15. Possibly. Bell frowned. Is that a problem? Not yet, but uncertainty has a tiresome habit of becoming important. Wimsey bent slightly toward the desk. A single sheet of paper lay beside Vail's right hand. The writing upon it was unmistakably threatening. You will regret what you have done. Keep silent, or the next document will be your last. Below it was a signature, Charles Fenwick. Bell watched Wimsey's face. You know the name? Secretary to the deceased? Yes, 29. Worked here 3 years. Quarreled with Vail tonight. Several witnesses heard it. Convenient. Very. Wimsey picked up his eyeglass and examined the note without touching it. Mr. Fenwick wrote this? That is his signature, my dear Inspector. Signatures are notoriously optimistic things. Bell folded his arms. You think it is forged? I think nothing at present. Thinking is a luxury one should postpone until the furniture has finished talking. The study clock ticked loudly. Wimsey glanced at it. The hands showed 25 minutes past 10. Has anyone altered that? Not that we know of. Excellent. Excellent? Yes. A clock that agrees with everyone is usually rather suspicious. Bell stared at him. From the doorway came a small, distressed sound. Mrs. Agnes Pritchard stood there, her iron-gray hair pulled severely back, her hands clasped around a folded apron. May I come in, Inspector? Not yet. She looked past him at the body. I knew something was wrong. Everybody knows that after a murder, said Wimsey gently. Beforehand, the human race is remarkably brave. Mrs. Pritchard looked offended by the truth of this. Behind her stood Thomas Rook, the butler, tall and motionless, his white mustache giving him the expression of a man who had personally disapproved of the 20th century. Wimsey glanced from servant to servant. Who found Dr. Vail? Mr. Rook, Bell replied, and before him, no one. Who last saw the doctor alive? Mr. Fenwick, as far as we know. Ah, the word was soft, almost careless. Bell looked at him sharply. You know what happened? I know that a dead man cannot contradict anyone's memory of the evening. It makes him a surprisingly popular witness. He returned his attention to the paper. The handwriting was neat, angular, and unmistakably practiced. Charles Fenwick's name appeared at the bottom with an almost theatrical flourish. Wimsey's expression changed by the smallest degree. Not surprise, not suspicion, merely attention. He looked once more at the dead man, then at the note, then at the clock. Wimsey moved nearer the desk. The papers were arranged with offensive precision. Correspondence in one pile, reference cards in another, and a fountain pen parallel with the blotter. The neatness was the sort of order produced by a man who believed disorder a moral defect. "Did Dr. Vale work this late?" he asked. "Frequently," said Bell. "He was a scholar. Then we must not accuse him of eccentricity because he preferred his books to his bed." His gaze wandered over the shelves. There were volumes on paleography, legal history, and manuscripts. A magnifying glass lay beside the lamp. Nothing appeared disturbed except the chair and the spectacles. "Was anything taken?" "Not that we have found." "Splendid. A burglary without burglary is so much easier to investigate." Bell sighed. Wimsey smiled. He had learned that the first hour of a murder was the hour in which everyone tried to make the facts respectable. People put clocks in order, straightened chairs, supplied motives, and remembered conversations which had never occurred. Objects, fortunately, were less socially ambitious. Outside, the rain struck the glass with increasing force. Somewhere deeper in the house, a bell sounded once. Everyone turned. Wimsey did not. Instead, he lifted one eyebrow and said, very softly, "How remarkably obliging." Section 2. A household full of innocent people. By breakfast, Blackthorn Hall had divided itself into two camps, those who distrusted Charles Fenwick and those who distrusted everybody else. Lord Peter Wimsey, having slept for scarcely 4 hours, regarded both camps. Every witness suddenly possessed memories, suspicions, and a remarkable recollection of what somebody else had been doing. Inspector Harold Bell met him in the morning room. "Tea?" "Thank you. I should like some. Murder is thirsty." Bell poured. "The servants are ready." "How brave of them. They are nervous. Then they are probably telling the truth about something." Bell looked annoyed. Wimsey took his cup and followed him into the servants' sitting room, where Mrs. Agnes Pritchard sat bolt upright beside the fire. Thomas Rook stood near the mantelpiece, looking as though he had been carved there in an earlier and more disciplined age. Mrs. Pritchard began before Bell could ask anything. "I know nothing at all about it." "Excellent," said Wimsey. "That saves us the tedious process of discovering it." She stared at him. "I mean that I know nothing that could possibly help." "That is precisely the sort of thing which often helps enormously." She folded her hands. "Dr. Vale had his supper at 7:30. He was in his study afterward." "Who carried him coffee?" "I did." "When?" "At 8:45. "Precisely?" "Near enough." Wimsey smiled faintly. "Near enough is a useful expression. It has concealed more crimes than fingerprints." Mrs. Pritchard frowned. "I took the tray in. Mr. Fenwick was there." "How long?" "Only a few minutes." "Did you hear what they said?" "No." "Did you hear them quarreling?" "I heard voices. Angry voices?" She hesitated. Mr. Fenwick sounded angry. "And Dr. Vale?" "Dr. Vale always sounded angry when he was being reasonable." Wimsey inclined his head, a valuable distinction. He asked about the tray, the cups, the study lamp, and the servants' movements. None of the questions appeared connected. Mrs. Pritchard answered patiently until he asked about the study door. "It was shut when I left." "Did you close it?" "Yes." "Did it latch?" "It always does." Thomas Rook cleared his throat. "Not always." Mrs. Pritchard turned upon him. "Thomas, it does occasionally fail to catch. Never when I attend to it. I merely stated the fact." Wimsey looked from one to the other. Facts are so troublesome. They persist in surviving disagreement. He made no further comment. Thomas Rook was questioned next. "You discovered the body?" "Yes, my lord." "Tell me exactly what you did." "At 9:56, I went to the study with the Evening Post. I knocked. There was no answer. I opened the door and found Dr. Vale." "Was the door locked?" "No." "Was it latched?" Rook paused. "It appeared to be." "Appeared." The latch had caught. Wimsey's eyebrows rose slightly. "Thank you." Rook continued. I summoned Inspector Bell. Mrs. Pritchard came from the corridor. Had you heard anything before entering? No. Nothing unusual? No. Not even the study bell? Rook looked toward Mrs. Pritchard. I heard no bell. Mrs. Pritchard stiffened. I did. When? Before Mr. Rook found the body. How long before? I cannot say. Did you go to the study? No. Why not? Dr. Vale had a bell in the study. It rang sometimes. Sometimes? She nodded. He used it when he wanted me. And you did not answer. I was carrying linen upstairs. Wimsey sipped his tea. Of course. The interview ended there. Outside the room, Bell said, You see, nothing. On the contrary, we have acquired 2 versions of a bell. That is hardly important. Most things are hardly important until they become important. They crossed the corridor. Eleanor Vale was waiting near the drawing-room door. She appeared composed, but there were faint shadows beneath her eyes. You wished to speak to me. If you please. They entered the drawing-room. Eleanor sat upright. My uncle had many enemies. Did he? Yes. Mr. Fenwick, among others. Was there a quarrel last night? Yes. About what? A manuscript. Was Mr. Fenwick angry? Yes. Was your uncle? Eleanor's mouth tightened. He was often angry. So I am told. Wimsey glanced toward the clock on the mantel. What time did you last see Dr. Vale alive? At 11 minutes past 9. Exactly? I looked at the clock. Why? I had an appointment to telephone someone. Who? A friend in Norwich. Did you make the call? No. Why not? I changed my mind. Wimsey nodded, as though this were an entirely satisfactory explanation. After leaving your uncle, where did you go? To the drawing room. Were you there continuously? Yes. Anyone with you? Beatrice was there. Miss Fenwick? Yes. And before you went to your uncle? I had been in the library. For how long? I do not remember. Wimsey smiled pleasantly. How fortunate. If you remembered everything, we should have very little to discuss. Do you suspect me? My dear Miss Vale, suspicion is such a vulgar word. I merely collect inconsistencies. Wimsey smiled pleasantly. He rose. As they left, Mrs. Pritchard was passing along the corridor with folded linen. She stopped abruptly. My lord, yes, there is one thing. Wimsey waited. When I heard the study bell last night, I thought I heard the door afterward. The door? A little sound, as if someone had opened it. And did you see anyone? No. Did you hear footsteps? No. Then what makes you think the door opened? She looked embarrassed. I cannot explain it. Splendid, said Wimsey. Those are often the most interesting things. He walked on. Behind him, Mrs. Pritchard watched silently. The house seemed calm in daylight, yet every room appeared to contain a slightly different version of the previous night, and somewhere among those versions was a door which had either opened, remained shut, or had merely persuaded a household that it had done one of the two. Wimsey said nothing about which possibility interested him. Section 3. The Secretary with the Muddy Reputation. Inspector Harold Bell had the satisfying air of a man whose murder case had acquired a suspect overnight and could therefore be expected to behave itself. Charles Fenwick was waiting in the library when Wimsey entered. He stood beside the writing table, thin shoulders rigid, spectacles catching the grey morning light. His cuffs were stained with ink, and his expression suggested that he had spent the night being accused by people who had never met a blank sheet of paper they could not improve. Mr. Fenwick, said Wimsey, I am told you had a disagreement with Dr. Vale. A disagreement? Bell, standing by the fireplace, answered for him. A serious quarrel. Charles looked at the inspector. I argued with him. You threatened him. I said I would make him regret what he had done, which is rather unfortunate, said Wimsey, considering what happened afterward. Charles flushed. I did not mean murder. No, people seldom do. It would make conversations dreadfully explicit. Bell frowned. Mr. Fenwick, tell Lord Peter what happened after dinner. Charles drew a breath. I went to Dr. Vale's study at about 20 minutes to 9. He had asked me to bring the manuscript. What manuscript? A 17th-century collection of letters. Were you responsible for the alteration? No. The answer came too quickly, and Bell noticed it. So you knew what he suspected. I knew he suspected someone. And you? I was responsible for the transcription. Were you responsible for the alteration? Charles stared at him. No. The answer came too quickly, and Bell noticed it. Did he accuse you? No. Did you become angry? Yes. Why? Because he threatened to dismiss me. Wimsey raised an eyebrow, employment being one of those modern institutions in which a man may be murdered merely because he wishes to continue receiving his salary. Charles ignored the remark. He said I had been careless. I told him he was insulting me. What happened then? I left. At what time? About 8:49. Precisely. I looked at the clock before I went. Why? I wanted to know whether I could still catch the village bus. Did you? No. I walked. Where? To the village. Bell interrupted. We have checked that. He was seen near the post office. By whom? Mrs. Carter, the tobacconist. Ah. A reliable witness? She knows him. Then she has the advantage of familiarity over evidence. Bell's mouth tightened. Charles leaned forward. I went to the post office because I needed to send a letter. What letter? A personal one. To whom? My sister. Wimsey glanced toward the ink on Charles's cuff. You write by hand? Of course. How old-fashioned. Charles looked uncertain whether he had been insulted. Where is the letter? I posted it. When? Just after 9. Bell said. The postmark supports his account. Wimsey nodded. Very helpful. He examined Charles's hands without touching them. Do you always use that ink? Yes. Black? Yes. Dr. Vale's ink was blue-black. Bell looked impatient. Does that matter? It may matter enormously, or it may be ink. Wimsey turned back to Charles. Did you return to the hall after leaving? No. Did you speak to anyone by telephone? No. Did you know Dr. Vale was dead before Mr. Rook found him? Of course not. Charles's voice cracked slightly on the last word. The door opened. Beatrice Fenwick entered without waiting to be announced. She wore a dark green dressing gown over a black dress, as though mourning had been hurriedly assembled from whatever was nearest. Charles, she crossed the room. Inspector Bell says you are to remain here. I know. You cannot possibly think he killed Edmund. Bell said. No one has accused him formally. Then why is he being questioned? Because, said Wimsey, his handwriting has become remarkably sociable. Beatrice looked at him. What does that mean? Nothing at all. I am occasionally guilty of saying things before breakfast. Her gaze moved to Charles. You quarreled with Dr. Vale, yes, but you would never have killed him. Charles looked away. Wimsey noticed the movement. Miss Fenwick, you appear certain. I know my brother. Beatrice's eyes flashed. You think him guilty? I have not said so. But everyone else does. Everyone else is often wonderfully efficient at arriving. You should speak to Eleanor. Why? She knows what Edmund was doing. Charles turned sharply. Beatrice. She ignored him. Edmund had been threatening someone for weeks. Charles was not the only person afraid of him. The room became still. Bell stepped forward. Who? Beatrice hesitated. I don't know. Then why mention it? Because it is true. Wimsey studied her. Did Dr. Vale threaten you? No. Your brother? No. Someone else. She looked toward the window. I said I don't know. Wimsey did not press her. Instead, he picked up a blotting pad from the table and looked at it. Mr. Fenwick, may I ask one more thing? Yes. Your handwriting is distinctive, is it not? Charles swallowed. So I have been told. Did Dr. Vale ever keep samples of it? Probably. He kept samples of everybody's handwriting. Even yours? Yes. Interesting. Charles looked uneasy. Why? Wimsey replaced the blotting pad exactly where he had found it. I am afraid I have not yet discovered. Inspector Bell gave him a hard stare. The note beside the body is in Fenwick's handwriting. We have motive, an argument, and an opportunity. Do we? Bell nodded. Why not? Because, said Wimsey lightly, An opportunity is not the same thing as an attendance record. Charles looked at him for the first time with something resembling hope. Wimsey turned away before the expression could settle into his face. He crossed to the library window and looked down upon the wet gravel drive. Behind him, Bell continued questioning Charles about the argument, the manuscript, and the threat. Wimsey listened without appearing to listen. On Charles's right cuff was a smear of fresh black ink. On the threatening note was dark writing. The resemblance was almost offensively convenient. Wimsey said nothing about it. He merely watched the rain slide down the glass and wondered, to all outward appearance about nothing whatsoever, how many people had found the dead man's secretary sufficiently disagreeable to make him a useful murderer. Section 4. The clock that was 7 minutes late. The rain had ceased by noon, leaving Blackthorn Hall washed into a colourless solemnity. Lord Peter Wimsey had discovered that country houses were particularly deceptive in daylight. At night, they offered shadows, drafts, and ancestral portraits with suspicious expressions. By midday, they merely offered unpaid bills and carpets, requiring attention. He was standing in the entrance hall examining the clock when Inspector Harold Bell found him. "Have you taken to investigating timepieces?" "Not at all. I am investigating the people who trust them." The clock stood beneath a carved wooden arch. Its brass pendulum moved with admirable regularity. "Does it keep good time?" Wimsey asked. "Apparently. Apparently is the enemy of precision." Bell glanced at his watch. "It was correct yesterday evening, was it?" Bell looked irritated. "Why should it not be?" "Because clocks are mechanical objects. They are entitled to be wrong." Wimsey produced his own watch and compared it with the hall clock. 7 minutes. Bell stared. "What? The hall clock is 7 minutes slow." Bell consulted his watch. "That cannot be." An encouraging phrase. People generally say it immediately before discovering that it can. Bell went to the clock, opened its glass door, and inspected the mechanism. "It has stopped." "No, it is ticking." Bell watched the pendulum. "So it is. Then perhaps it is merely slow. Can you tell when it became slow?" "No," Wimsey smiled. "Neither can I. That is why I asked." He left the clock and walked toward the study. Inside, the room had been preserved as Inspector Bell's men had left it. The corpse was gone, but the impression of Dr. Edmund Vale remained in every object. The orderly papers, the books, the green-shaded lamp, the bronze paperweight, and the chair standing slightly askew. Wimsey examined the carpet. "Interesting," Bell sighed. "What now?" "The carpet." "What about it?" "It is a very expensive carpet." Bell waited. Wimsey looked up. "And nothing." He moved to the curtains. "Were these drawn last night?" "Yes." "Both?" "Yes." "Who drew them?" "I don't know. Did anyone notice?" "No." "Excellent." Bell folded his arms. "You are enjoying yourself." "Immensely. It is rare to find a house where the curtains have so little ambition." Wimsey approached the study door. Thomas Rook appeared in the corridor. "Mr. Rook." "My lord, show me how this door closes." Rook opened it, then pulled it shut. The latch clicked. "Now open it without turning the handle." Rook pushed. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. The latch released. Wimsey raised an eyebrow. "It does that?" "Occasionally." "Only occasionally?" "Yes." "Does it happen more often when the door is pulled gently?" Rook considered. "Yes. And if it is pulled firmly, it usually catches." Wimsey nodded. "Thank you," Bell said. "You already knew that." "I knew it was defective. I did not know how." He turned toward the telephone on Vale's desk. "Does this extension ring in the servants' quarters?" "No," said Rook. "Only the study bell is connected." "Where is the bell?" "On the wall beside the desk." Wimsey examined it. Old-fashioned. Dr. Vale preferred it. "Did he use it often?" "Whenever he wanted tea, papers, or Mrs. Pritchard." An economical arrangement. 1 bell, 3 varieties of obedience. He inspected the telephone cord. "Was this always positioned here?" Rook hesitated. "I believe so." "Believe?" "I never had cause to move it." Wimsey touched nothing. "Good." He turned to Bell. "Has anyone examined the telephone?" "Yes, properly." Bell looked annoyed. What do you mean by properly? I haven't the faintest idea. That is why I ask questions. They were interrupted by Miss Clara Wren, who appeared carrying a stack of papers. Lord Peter? Yes, I was told you wanted to see Dr. Vale's document files. I do. Clara placed the papers on a table. He kept most of his working specimens in the archive cabinet. Handwriting specimens? Yes. How many? Hundreds. Organized, meticulously, by author, by period and type. Wimsey glanced toward the cabinet. Was Mr. Fenwick's handwriting among them? Clara hesitated. Yes. Anything unusual about that? No. Wimsey waited. She looked uncomfortable. Miss Wren? There were older samples. Whose? Various people. Do you remember one in particular? I remember Dr. Vale saying that some handwriting could be more revealing than fingerprints. Belle gave a small, impatient sound. Everyone has been saying things like that since last night. Yes, said Wimsey, and everyone has been remarkably reluctant to say what they mean. He examined the papers without opening them. Did Dr. Vale write notes on his specimens? Sometimes. In ink? Usually. What sort? Blue-black, I think. Wimsey's eyes moved briefly toward the desk. And the specimen sheets? Mostly black ink? Interesting. Clara looked at him. Is something wrong? Not at all, he smiled. That is what makes it so interesting. At the doorway, Mrs. Agnes Pritchard appeared with a tray. Tea, my lord. Thank you. She set it down. Wimsey noticed the tray, then the corridor, then the clock visible through the open doorway. Mrs. Pritchard, how often did Dr. Vale ask for tea after 9? Rarely. Coffee? Never. Did he have a habit of ringing for anything at that hour? Sometimes. What did you take him? Nothing if I was busy. Very sensible. She looked relieved. Was he particular about the study? Extremely. Did he permit anyone to touch his papers? No. Not even Mr. Fenwick? He allowed Mr. Fenwick to work there, which is not quite the same thing. No, my lord. Wimsey thanked her. After she left, Belle said, You have asked about clocks, carpets, curtains, doors, telephones, bells, ink and tea. Have I? What are you looking for? Wimsey regarded him with innocent surprise. My dear Inspector, I am looking for absolutely nothing. Belle stared. Wimsey picked up his tea. I merely find it comforting to know that a murder can be surrounded by so many perfectly ordinary things. He looked once more toward the archive cabinet. Then his gaze returned to the clock. Neither object received an explanation for the moment. Section 5. The bell at 9:52. By 4 o'clock the rain had returned, and Blackthorn Hall had resumed its nocturnal complexion several hours before sunset. The windows reflected the rooms instead of the fields beyond them, so that every passage seemed to contain a second, quieter house superimposed upon the first. Lord Peter Wimsey sat at the library table with a sheet of paper, a pencil, and Inspector Harold Bell's notebook. You are making a timetable, Bell observed. I am committing an act of violence against time. Bell pulled out a chair. The facts are straightforward. Fenwick leaves the study at 8:49. Eleanor Vale sees her uncle at 9:11. Rook finds the body at 9:56. Mrs. Pritchard hears the study bell at 9:52. Yes, so what is difficult? The order. Bell looked at the paper. Everything appears in order. Then let us see whether it walks in a straight line. Wimsey drew 4 columns. First, Mr. Fenwick. He leaves the study at 8:49 and walks to the village. Mrs. Carter sees him. How long does the walk take? About 6 minutes. And from the post office to the hall? 10 minutes. Thus he cannot have returned before roughly 9:25. Correct. Good. Wimsey wrote it down. Now Miss Vale. She leaves her uncle at 9:11. Yes, and goes to the drawing room. She says so. Miss Fenwick confirms that she was there. Bell nodded. Then we have 9:11 accounted for. Apparently. Bell frowned. Wimsey looked up. I am merely being grammatical. He drew another line. Now the study clock. 7 minutes slow, Bell said, which means that when it displayed 10:25, the actual time was 10:32. Yes, but when Rook discovered the body, He did not use the study clock. He looked at the hall clock. Correct. And the hall clock. Correct time. Very good. Wimsey leaned back. Then why was the study clock set to 7 minutes slow? Bell shrugged. Perhaps Vale neglected it. Perhaps. The word remained between them. Bell tapped the notebook. The doctor estimates death between 9:40 and 9:50. On what basis? The condition of the body. Useful, but approximate. Then we have the bell at 9:52. Ah, Wimsey tapped his pencil. Tell me exactly what Mrs. Pritchard heard. She heard one ring from the study. Only one. Yes. Then what did she hear afterward? She says she thought she heard the study door opening. She believes so. Does she know the sound? She has worked here 30 years, which means she knows the sound of a door opening in this house, not necessarily the sound of that door opening on that night. Bell frowned. You think she imagined it? I think human ears are courageous but unreliable. He stood. Come. They walked to the study. Wimsey closed the door. Bell remained outside. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear the rain? Barely. Wimsey moved farther into the room. What if I speak? I hear you. What if I whisper? Not clearly. Wimsey smiled. Soundproof enough for conversation, insufficient for imagination. He opened the door. Now stand here. Bell obeyed. Wimsey crossed to the desk. Imagine Dr. Vale sitting in his chair. I am trying. Imagine him alive. I'd rather not. Quite. Wimsey glanced at the telephone. Suppose the bell rings. Bell looked toward the wall. It would be heard in the corridor. Yes, Mrs. Pritchard would answer it. Unless she was carrying linen. Bell stared at him. She was, so she says. They returned to the library. Wimsey studied the Times again. Something interests me. Bell waited. Wimsey said nothing further. Instead, he asked, how long did the telephone call last? What call? The one recorded in the household log. Bell opened his notebook. There was a call to the hall at 9:47. It lasted approximately 2 minutes. Who answered? No one knows. The caller hung up. Was the study extension engaged? According to the exchange, the line showed activity. Wimsey's pencil stopped. Who recorded that? The telephone exchange. Automatically. Yes. Then that is better evidence than memory. Bell nodded. Wimsey wrote 9:47 beside the other times. 5 minutes later, the bell rings. Yes. And 4 minutes after that, Rook discovers the body. Yes. An active telephone line at 9:47, a bell at 9:52, and a body at 9:56. It suggests the doctor was alive. It suggests something was happening in the study. Bell looked irritated. Is that distinction necessary? Usually. They returned to the study once more. Wimsey stood beside the telephone. Inspector, place your hand here. Why? Because I asked charmingly. Bell did so. Now move the cord slightly. Bell shifted it. The study bell gave a faint click. He looked up. That was not a ring. No. He moved it again. The bell sounded once. Bell stared. Wimsey's expression remained unreadable. Old electrical fittings, he said. That could explain Mrs. Pritchard's bell. Could it? Bell looked at him. You don't think so? I did not say that. He carefully returned the cord to its former position. For several seconds neither man spoke. Then Wimsey looked at the study clock. Tell me, Inspector, when you first entered this room, did you notice whether the clock was already slow? No. And did anyone mention it? No. Interesting. He walked to the door and opened it. From the corridor came the ordinary sounds of the household. Footsteps, distant crockery, a closing door, nothing remarkable, nothing supernatural. Yet the times written in Bell's notebook now seemed less like a sequence and more like pieces of a badly assembled puzzle. Bell said, You have found a discrepancy. Wimsey put his pencil away. I have found several. What do they mean? Wimsey smiled faintly. That, Inspector, is a question for a later hour. He glanced toward the study, where the silent clock continued faithfully losing 7 minutes. Then, from somewhere down the corridor, the telephone rang once in the darkness. Section 6. The letter in the vicar's drawer. The vicarage stood at the edge of the village, a square, respectable building which had apparently been designed by an architect who believed that comfort was a moral weakness. Reverend Lionel Marsh received Lord Peter Wimsey in a study crowded with sermons, theological works, and the accumulated debris of 50 years of good intentions. "I am told," said Wimsey, "that you possess a letter belonging to Dr. Vale." The Reverend looked surprised. "Who told you?" "Nobody. I have been told several things by people who have not spoken." "That sounds uncomfortable. Most useful information is." Marsh opened a locked drawer in his desk and removed a narrow envelope, yellow with age. "I have kept this for 18 years. Why?" "Because Dr. Vale asked me to." "Did he say why?" "He said that one day it might matter." Wimsey examined the envelope without opening it. "Was it written by him?" "No." "Whom?" "Thomas Vale." "Edmund Vale's father?" "Yes." Wimsey's expression altered almost imperceptibly. "May I?" Marsh handed him the letter. The paper was brittle. The writing was old-fashioned, compact and controlled. Wimsey read it silently, then read it again. "What does it concern?" "A manuscript." "Ah," Marsh sighed. Thomas Vale was accused of altering a collection of 17th-century letters. The accusation never became public. Edmund dealt with it privately. And Thomas? He died before anything was proved. Convenient. Tragic. Those words are occasionally interchangeable. Marsh looked troubled. Edmund believed his father had committed no deliberate fraud. He thought the alterations had been made by another person. Did he? Yes. Who? Marsh shook his head. He never told me. Wimsey folded the letter carefully. Did Dr. Vale keep other specimens of Thomas Vale's handwriting? I believe so. Did he ever show them to you? Once. When? Several years ago. What did he say? That handwriting could preserve a man's character after everything else had disappeared. Wimsey glanced toward the envelope. Rather poetic for a forensic specialist. Edmund was not always as cold as people thought. I am beginning to suspect that nobody in this case is as cold as people think. Marsh looked toward the rain-streaked window. There is something else. Wimsey waited. Eleanor knew about the accusation. How? Edmund told her. Recently? Several months ago. Why? I cannot say. Did she react strongly? The vicar hesitated. She was very quiet. Ah, the dangerous variety. Marsh frowned. She was devoted to her father. Was she? Yes. And to her uncle? That is more complicated. Most family affection is. The vicar leaned forward. Lord Peter, are you suggesting Eleanor had some reason to resent Edmund? I suggest nothing. I merely collect complications. He opened the letter again. The handwriting was remarkably steady. Certain letters possessed unusual angular forms. The capital E was narrow, the lowercase g almost closed, and the final strokes were sharply lifted. Wimsey took out his pencil. May I make a note? Certainly. He copied 2 short characters onto his own paper. Marsh watched him. Is that significant? I haven't the faintest idea. That is becoming your favorite answer. It has the advantage of being true. The door opened. Clara Wren entered, carrying a small bundle of papers. I am sorry. I did not know you were here. Miss Wren, said Wimsey, you have arrived at precisely the right moment. She looked at the letter. Is that Thomas Vale's writing? You recognize it? I have seen specimens in Dr. Vale's archive. Were they catalogued? Yes. By whom? Dr. Vale. Did anyone else have access? Mr. Fenwick had access when preparing research materials. And Eleanor? Clara hesitated. Sometimes. Sometimes is a wonderfully elastic word. She could enter the archive when Dr. Vale permitted it. Did she know how the specimens were organized? Yes. Wimsey nodded. Clara looked uneasy. Is this about the note? Everything is about the note, Miss Wren. Unfortunately, the note does not know it. She almost smiled. I thought the handwriting looked like Charles's. So did everyone. Wimsey returned the letter to Marsh. Did you ever compare Charles Fenwick's handwriting with Thomas Vale's? No. Why would I? Exactly. He rose. Reverend, I shall need the letter for a little longer. Marsh looked reluctant. It is the only thing I have from Thomas. I shall treat it with greater care than most people treat their relatives. The vicar smiled despite himself. As they stepped outside, Clara walked beside Wimsey. Do you think the letter matters? Wimsey buttoned his coat. Letters are like parishioners. They rarely say precisely what one wishes, but they are apt to preserve evidence. Evidence of what? Miss Wren, if I told you that, I should have to stop asking questions. She looked at him. You have not answered anything. My dear young lady, I have answered several things. I have merely declined to label them. They walked back toward Blackthorn Hall. The wind moved across the churchyard, stirring dead leaves against the gravestones. Clara said quietly, Eleanor was very upset when Dr. Vale mentioned her father. Wimsey glanced at her. How upset? She asked whether the old documents still existed. When? About 3 weeks ago. Did she say why? No. Did Dr. Vale answer? He said, Everything exists somewhere, Eleanor. That is the trouble with paper. Wimsey stopped for half a second. Then he continued walking. At Blackthorn Hall, Eleanor Vale was standing beneath the porch, waiting for them. Her eyes moved immediately to the envelope in Wimsey's hand. She said nothing. Neither did Wimsey. Wimsey took the envelope from its fold and held it beside the threatening note which Clara had brought from the police files. He compared the two silently, moving his gaze from one specimen to the other. His face remained blank, but one eyebrow rose a fraction and then fell. For the first time, Eleanor's composure faltered, and the silence between them became more eloquent than any accusation. Section 7. The window that invited the night. By the following morning, the study had acquired a new theory. It had been entered from outside. Beatrice Fenwick announced it with the solemnity of a woman unveiling an unpleasant relative. I remembered something, she said. Lord Peter Wimsey looked up from his breakfast. Memory is an admirable servant when it has finished changing its clothes. What have you remembered? The study window. Inspector Harold Bell, seated opposite, put down his cup. What about it? It was open. Yesterday you said nothing about that. I did not remember. Wimsey buttered his toast. Quite. And now? I saw it when I passed the corridor before dinner. It was slightly ajar. At what time? Perhaps 9 o'clock. Perhaps. I cannot be exact. Of course. Bell leaned forward. Why is this important? Beatrice looked toward Wimsey. Someone could have entered that way. Someone could have entered through the chimney, said Wimsey. The question is whether anyone did. Beatrice frowned. You make everything sound ridiculous. Not everything, only the things which are. Bell rose. Let us inspect it. They crossed to the study. The window was tall and narrow, opening outward upon a stone terrace. Beyond it lay a strip of wet lawn, bordered by yew trees. Bell examined the sill. No obvious marks. Any mud? None. Wet footprints? No. Broken glass? No. Wimsey looked down at the terrace. Rain had fallen heavily during the night, and the stone was dark with moisture. The lawn beyond it was soft enough to record a shoe. Bell stepped outside. Nothing. Wimsey remained indoors. Would an intruder have left the window open? Perhaps. Why? To escape. From what? Bell turned. The murder. Wimsey smiled. A circular explanation. He moved toward the curtains. The heavy fabric hung almost motionless. He touched the edge of one curtain and let it fall. Was this drawn last night? Beatrice answered. I think so. Again. She flushed. I am doing my best. Your best is often much more dangerous than certainty. Bell looked irritated. What does the curtain tell us? Nothing. He pulled the window open several inches. A cold current entered the room. Observe. Bell watched. The curtain lifted, swung inward, and brushed the desk. An open window makes a considerable draught, Wimsey said. Yes. And yet the papers on the desk were undisturbed. Bell looked at the papers. The important papers. Exactly. He closed the window. The curtain settled. Then he opened it again. This time he noticed something on the carpet, a tiny dark fiber. He bent toward it, examined it without touching it, and straightened. Bell asked, "What is it?" "Possibly wool. From an intruder's coat? Possibly. Then we have something." "No, Inspector. We have a piece of wool." Bell sighed. Wimsey walked to the desk. The blotter remained where Vale had kept it. Its surface showed faint impressions where writing had once been pressed into the paper. "Was this examined?" Bell nodded. "Yes, nothing useful." "Was the paper underneath removed?" "No." "Was anything missing?" "We have not found anything." Wimsey looked at the blotter. "Interesting." Bell's patience was thinning. "You said that yesterday. I have an excellent memory." "Then tell me what is interesting." "I am afraid that would spoil the pleasure." He turned toward the door. Thomas Rook was standing there. "Mr. Rook, when you discovered Dr. Vale, was this window open?" "No, my lord." "Closed?" "Yes." "Fully?" "I believe so." "Could the wind have closed it?" Rook considered. "Not entirely." "Why?" "The catch is stiff." Wimsey nodded. "Thank you." Bell looked from Rook to the window. "So if it was open earlier, somebody closed it, or the wind did." "You just said the wind could not." "I said the wind could not easily." Bell muttered something beneath his breath. Wimsey ignored it. He examined the latch on the window, then looked at the study door. "Mr. Rook." "Yes?" "When you found the body, was the study door completely closed?" "Yes." "Could you see the latch from the corridor?" "No." "Did it require pressure to close?" "Yes." "And if someone pulled it gently, it might catch?" Wimsey nodded. "That is all." Rook departed. Beatrice watched him. "You are still considering the possibility of an intruder." "I am considering several possibilities." "Which one do you believe?" Wimsey smiled. "I should hate to deprive the possibilities of their privacy." Bell returned from the terrace. "There is no sign anyone crossed the lawn." "Then the window becomes less hospitable." "But it was open." "So you say." Beatrice stared at him. "I saw it. I do not doubt your eyesight." "Then you believe me?" "I believe that you saw an open window." "That is the same thing." "Not quite." Wimsey looked again at the curtain. "Seeing a window open establishes the window. It does not establish who opened it, when it was opened, or why." Bell said, "You are making a simple matter unnecessarily complicated." "My dear Inspector, murder is the only profession in which simplicity is generally evidence of preparation." They left the study. In the corridor, Clara Wren approached carrying an evidence envelope. "Lord Peter." "Yes?" "This was found behind the desk." Inside was a small rectangle of blotting paper, folded once. Wimsey examined it through the glass. "Where exactly?" "Behind the desk." "Was it there before?" "I don't know." He held it toward the light. There were faint pressure marks upon it, almost invisible. Bell leaned closer. "Writing?" "Possibly." Wimsey's expression sharpened. "Do not touch it." Clara withdrew her hand. "What does it say?" "Nothing." He looked once toward the study, then toward Eleanor Vale, who had appeared at the far end of the corridor. She stopped when she saw the envelope. For several seconds nobody moved. Wimsey slipped the evidence envelope carefully into his pocket. He did not explain the marks. He did not explain Eleanor's expression. He merely looked back at the study window, now firmly shut, and said, "One begins to feel that this house has an unfortunate habit of inviting the night indoors." And somewhere behind him, the study door clicked softly into its imperfect latch. Section 8. The rehearsal of a dead man's evening. The rain had stopped by 9 o'clock, leaving Blackthorn Hall shining under a hard, clear moon. Lord Peter Wimsey announced at dinner that he intended to conduct a rehearsal. Inspector Harold Bell stared at him. "A rehearsal?" "Precisely. For what?" "For last night." Bell put down his knife. "You cannot recreate a murder." "My dear Inspector, people recreate murders constantly. Usually they call it giving evidence." Around the table, Eleanor Vale remained composed. Charles Fenwick looked irritated. Beatrice Fenwick appeared intrigued. Clara Wren watched Wimsey with quiet attention. Mrs. Agnes Pritchard, summoned from the servants' hall, arrived looking apprehensive. Thomas Rook followed her. Wimsey led them all toward the study. "We shall begin at 9:45, he said. Bell frowned. "Why 9:45? "Because that is approximately when the body is supposed to have become inconveniently dead." No one laughed. "Mr. Rook," said Wimsey, "you will stand outside the study door." Rook obeyed. "Mrs. Pritchard, you will go to the far end of the corridor. At 9:52, tell us exactly what you heard." "I heard the bell." "Good. Then I thought I heard the door." "Excellent. We shall preserve that." Wimsey entered the study. "Miss Wren, you will remain with Inspector Bell." Clara nodded. "Mr. Fenwick, you will stand here." Charles moved beside the desk. "Why?" "Because you are the accused murderer." Charles stared. "I beg your pardon. Temporarily. Do try to enjoy it." Charles looked uncomfortable. Eleanor stood near the doorway. Wimsey noticed her. "Miss Vale, you will stand where you stood when you say you left the study." "At 9:11? "Precisely." She did so. "Now," said Wimsey, "we shall proceed." He moved to the desk and sat in Vale's chair. Charles stood opposite him. "Imagine that you are arguing with Dr. Vale. I remember the argument. Then imagination is unnecessary." Charles began describing it. Wimsey listened without interruption. At the appropriate moment, Charles turned and walked from the room. 8:49, said Bell. "Indeed." Wimsey looked at Eleanor. "You enter at 9:11. She stepped forward. He remained seated. She spoke briefly, as she had described the previous evening. Wimsey did not question her. After a minute, he said, "And you leave." Eleanor returned to the corridor. "Now," said Wimsey, "we wait." The house became extraordinarily still. The study clock ticked. At 9:47 by Wimsey's watch, he looked toward the telephone. "Inspector, stand here." Bell approached. "Move the cord." Bell touched it. Nothing happened. Again, he shifted it more firmly. The bell sounded. Mrs. Pritchard started. "That is it. Again, please." Bell moved the cord. The bell rang once more. Mrs. Pritchard shook her head. "I heard that last night." Wimsey said nothing. He reset the cord. "Now we wait for 9:52. Bell checked his watch. At precisely the appointed minute, Wimsey gave a slight nod. Bell moved the cord. The bell rang. Mrs. Pritchard looked startled. "That is exactly what I heard." "Thank you. But nobody touched the bell." "No." The silence which followed was more disturbing than the sound itself. Wimsey opened the study door. "Mr. Rook, what would you have done after hearing that bell?" "I should have come." "Would you have knocked?" "Yes. And if there were no answer, I should have opened the door. Would the latch have caught?" Rook demonstrated it. The door closed gently. The latch clicked. Wimsey pushed it. It opened. Bell's face changed. "You could have left it apparently shut without locking it." Rook nodded. "Yes." Wimsey looked at the clock. "Now, the final part." He returned to the desk. Clara brought the evidence envelope containing the blotting paper. Wimsey placed it beside the lamp. "Miss Wren, you said there were impressions." "Yes. Can you see them?" She bent over the paper. "Barely." "Good." Bell looked at him. "What does that prove?" Wimsey did not answer. Instead, he took a fresh sheet of paper and placed it over the blotter. "Observe the pressure marks." Clara leaned closer. "They correspond to writing." "Possibly." Bell frowned. "You have been saying that for 24 hours, and you have survived it admirably." Wimsey removed the sheet. "Now, Mr. Fenwick, write your name." Charles took the pen. He wrote. Wimsey compared it with the threatening note, then with the pressure marks. His expression remained unreadable. "Thank you." Charles looked at him. "What did you find?" "Nothing I am prepared to discuss." Bell groaned. Wimsey turned toward the telephone. "Now we shall perform the last part." He moved the cord exactly as before. The bell rang. Then he stepped into the corridor and closed the study door gently. From outside, the door appeared firmly shut. Mrs. Pritchard whispered, "But nobody is inside." "Precisely." Wimsey opened it again. The study was empty. He returned to the desk and looked at the telephone. Last night at 9:52, the household believed Dr. Vale had summoned someone. Bell nodded. And the telephone call at 9:47? Yes. Wimsey touched the receiver without lifting it. Very well. He replaced his hand. No explanation followed. Instead, he looked at Eleanor. She met his gaze steadily. For one brief moment, her composure seemed to tighten. Then Wimsey turned away. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The theater is closed. Bell stared at him. That is all? For tonight. And what have we proved? Wimsey picked up his gloves. That the dead are remarkably easy to impersonate, provided the living are willing to do the remembering for them. He walked from the study. Bell followed him into the corridor. You cannot leave it there. I can leave anything there. You have demonstrated a trick, perhaps. You have demonstrated that the bell can ring unanswered. Yes. And that the door can look locked when it is not. Yes. Then why not tell me what it means? Wimsey paused there. Because meaning is dangerous. Handle it too early, and one gets it on one's fingers. Bell stared at him. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Inspector. Behind him, the bell gave one final, solitary ring. Section 9. The handwriting gives evidence. Bell stood beside the fireplace, arms folded. Charles Fenwick looked exhausted. Beatrice Fenwick sat rigidly beside him. Clara Wren held the old letter from Reverend Lionel Marsh. Mrs. Agnes Pritchard and Thomas Rooke stood together near the door. Eleanor Vale sat opposite Wimsey, pale but perfectly composed. He picked up the threatening note. The handwriting has been telling the truth rather more faithfully than the people. Bell straightened. You have identified the writer? Wimsey looked at Charles. Not Mr. Charles Fenwick. Charles closed his eyes. Eleanor did not move. Bell said sharply, Then who? Wimsey laid the note beside the old letter from Thomas Vale. Let us begin with the beginning. Dr. Edmund Vale was alive at 9:17. We know this because the chronology subsequently supplied to the police is impossible. That clock was 7 minutes slow. It displayed 10:25 when the correct time was 10:32. More importantly, its error was treated as though it were a neutral witness. It was not, Wimsey continued. Charles Fenwick left the study at approximately 8:49. His argument with Dr. Vale is genuine. His anger is genuine. His journey to the village is genuine. The letter he posted is genuine. Unfortunately for our murderer, genuine facts are not always useful facts. Was written to make your genuine quarrel appear to have continued beyond the point at which you had left. Wimsey lifted the threatening message. The signature resembles your hand. So do the letters. Yet the resemblance is wrong in one extraordinarily interesting respect. He placed the old letter beside it. Certain letter forms in the note are not merely like yours. They belong to an older hand, the narrow capital E, the closed lowercase g, the elevated final stroke. Clara Wren whispered, Thomas Vale. Precisely. Bell stared at the two documents. But why would anyone copy Thomas Vale's handwriting? Because Dr. Vale kept specimens of it in his archive. Wimsey turned toward Clara. You told us the archive was carefully organized, and that Eleanor Vale knew how it was arranged. Eleanor spoke quietly. So did Charles. Indeed, but Charles had no reason to use his own handwriting as a disguise. The murderer copied Charles's hand from an old specimen, then altered the rhythm sufficiently to resemble his ordinary writing. The result was convincing to anyone looking for Charles, but not convincing to a man who compared the note with the older family specimens. Bell's face hardened. You are saying Eleanor wrote it? Yes. A silence fell. Eleanor remained motionless. Wimsey continued. Now the time. Eleanor saw Dr. Vale at 9:11. She left him alive. She then returned at 9:15, carrying the pretext of having forgotten a notebook. At 9:17 she struck him with a bronze paperweight. Charles stared at her. No. Yes, said Wimsey quietly. Afterward she had to manufacture a later death. At 9:19 she removed the obvious position of the weapon. At 9:23 she wrote the threatening note. At 9:27 she placed it beside the body, Bell said, and the clock. At 9:31 she made the study clock 7 minutes slow. That was not the entire alibi. It was merely one supporting prop, and the bell. Wimsey smiled without amusement. Ah, the bell. He indicated the telephone cord. At 9:47, the telephone exchange recorded activity on the study line. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Pritchard heard the bell. The connection between those events was not a living man's conversation. It was a staged electrical disturbance. He moved the cord slightly. The bell gave a faint click. Eleanor had discovered that moving the cord could operate the bell. She therefore arranged the cord so that the disturbance would produce a ring without anyone being present. Mrs. Pritchard whispered, "And I heard it." "Yes, you heard something real. You merely misunderstood what it was." Wimsey turned to Thomas Rook. The door completed the illusion. Eleanor left it apparently shut. Its defective latch allowed it to appear secured without being locked. Rook nodded slowly. "The window? Another piece of theater." Wimsey looked at Beatrice. "You remembered an open window. That encouraged the idea of an intruder, but the rain left no footprints, and the draught disturbed none of the papers. The window was not an entrance. It was scenery." Bell looked toward the blotting paper. "And this?" Wimsey lifted the evidence envelope. "The missing piece." He held it toward the light. The pressure marks were produced when Eleanor practiced the disguised handwriting before writing the final note. The blotting paper was removed because it retained evidence of the exercise. Eleanor's face had become very still, Bell said. Then the ink. Vale's archive contained specimens written in the same darker ink used on the threatening note. Charles's cuff merely proved that he had been working with documents. It did not prove he had written the threat. Charles gave a bitter laugh. "So all that evidence against me was manufactured?" "Not manufactured," said Wimsey. "Curated. A murderer rarely invents every fact. It is safer to arrange true facts so that they point in the wrong direction." He took up Reverend Marsh's letter. This established the decisive connection. The note contained handwriting forms derived from Thomas Vale's old specimen. Eleanor knew the archive. She knew her uncle's history. She knew what Charles's handwriting looked like. She also knew that Dr. Vale intended to expose the old family scandal. Eleanor finally spoke. "You cannot prove why." Wimsey's expression softened. "I need not prove what you felt. I need only prove what you did. Your motive was not money. Edmund Vale had spent years controlling you with your father's secret. When you discovered that he intended to expose the matter, you believed he would destroy the last protection your family possessed. You killed him to prevent that." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "He promised he would keep it buried, and then changed his mind. He wanted to punish my father." "No," said Wimsey. "He wanted to tell the truth. Unfortunately, truth and justice are not always twins." Bell stepped forward. Wimsey placed the threatening note on the table. "The handwriting exposed you because you chose the wrong dead man to imitate." Eleanor looked at Thomas Vale's letter. For the first time, her composure cracked. She whispered, "I thought nobody would notice." Wimsey answered, "Nobody noticed until everybody did." Section 10. The lady who had no more ink. For several seconds after Eleanor Vale's admission, nobody moved. The rain had begun again against the tall windows, softly at first, then with increasing persistence, as though the weather had decided that Blackthorn Hall had not suffered sufficient gloom and ought to receive a little more. Inspector Harold Bell was the first to recover. "Miss Vale," he said, "I must ask you to remain where you are." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Where should I go?" Bell had no answer. Charles Fenwick rose abruptly. "You killed him." "Yes," the word was almost inaudible. Beatrice caught her brother's arm. "Charles." He shook her off. "He meant to ruin you." "I know. You could have told us." Eleanor looked at him. "And what would you have done?" Charles opened his mouth, then closed it. Wimsey watched them both. There was no triumph in his face now. The intellectual puzzle had been solved, but the human one remained, and human puzzles were notoriously less obliging. Inspector Bell took a step forward. "You admit murdering Dr. Vale?" "I admit that I struck him." "With the paperweight?" "Yes." "Why?" Eleanor looked toward the study door. "Because he would not stop." Bell's voice softened slightly. "Stop what?" "Digging." Nobody spoke. Eleanor folded her hands upon her lap. "My father died 18 years ago. Edmund discovered that the manuscript attributed to him had been altered. He believed my father was responsible. He never proved it. He kept the matter secret, but he used it. Used it? He reminded me of it whenever I disagreed with him, whenever I wanted to leave, whenever I wished to marry, whenever I attempted to establish a life independent of this house. Her voice remained controlled. He said that my father's reputation depended upon his silence, Wimsey said quietly. And then he decided to break that silence. Yes. Why? Because he had become obsessed with the truth. Or with possessing it, said Wimsey. Eleanor looked at him. Perhaps both. Belle moved closer. You could have gone to the police, Eleanor laughed once. To say what? That my uncle possessed a secret about my dead father? That he intended to expose him? There was no law against telling the truth. No, but there was no mercy in it either. Charles stared at her. So you killed him? Yes, and then tried to make me take the blame. I did not mean for you to suffer. Charles gave a short, incredulous laugh. You forged a murder threat in my handwriting. I thought the police would arrest you quickly. They nearly did. I know. And that did not trouble you? Eleanor looked at him with sudden pain. Everything troubled me. The confession hung in the room. Beatrice began to cry silently. Wimsey turned toward the fireplace. There is one matter still to settle. Belle looked at him. What? The final statement. Eleanor's expression changed. What final statement? Dr. Vale's unfinished writing. Wimsey crossed to the desk and picked up the paper found beside the body. Beneath the ordinary notes was the beginning of an unfinished sentence. Belle examined it. We assumed it was irrelevant. So did I, initially. Wimsey turned the sheet. The final words were written before the attack. They concerned the old manuscript. Eleanor looked away. Belle said, What did he intend to write? Wimsey read the fragment. The evidence against Thomas Vale is insufficient, and I shall therefore... He stopped. Eleanor closed her eyes. Charles stared at her. He was going to clear your father? Yes. Her voice broke. He had changed his mind. Belle frowned. Then your motive makes less sense. No, said Wimsey. It makes rather more sense. She did not know he had changed his mind. Eleanor opened her eyes. I thought he meant to expose him. And you acted before discovering otherwise. Yes. Wimsey placed the paper down. That is the most unpleasant feature of many murders. The victim occasionally dies a few minutes before the murderer learns that the quarrel has already been won. Eleanor gave a small, broken laugh. I could not go back. No. I had written the note. I had altered the clock. I had made the bell ring. Everything was arranged. Not everything. She looked at him. The handwriting. Eleanor's face tightened. I believed Charles's writing would be enough. It nearly was. Belle turned toward the door. I shall send for the constable. Eleanor stood. For a moment it appeared that she might resist. Instead she walked to the window. The glass reflected her face back at her, pale, exhausted, and strangely young. Do you hate me, Lord Peter? Wimsey considered the question. No. Why not? Hatred requires a certain intimacy with another person's soul. I am afraid I have only been introduced to yours, she smiled sadly. That sounds like an evasion. It is. Belle approached her. She did not move. Charles remained where he was, staring at the floor. Beatrice crossed quietly to him. Come away, she whispered. He shook his head. I cannot. Why? Because she was afraid. Beatrice looked at Eleanor. Yes, and frightened people do dreadful things. Wimsey glanced at him. Indeed. Though frightened people also perform remarkable acts of courage, one should never make the mistake of believing fear belongs exclusively to criminals. Charles looked up. Did she ever mean to kill me? No. How do you know? Wimsey smiled faintly. Because she spent considerably more ingenuity arranging for your arrest than arranging for your death. That answer did not comfort him. Perhaps it was not intended to. The constable arrived a few minutes later. Eleanor submitted quietly to arrest. At the doorway she stopped. Lord Peter. Yes? If Dr. Vale had told me the truth that afternoon, none of this would have happened. Wimsey regarded her gravely. Perhaps. You do not believe me. I believe you believe it. She lowered her eyes. That is not the same. No. He watched her leave. The study door closed behind her. For the first time since the murder, Blackthorn Hall seemed genuinely silent. Inspector Bell returned. "You were right about everything." "My dear Inspector, that is a dangerous sentence. People begin expecting it." Bell smiled despite himself. "What shall I put in my report?" "The truth. All of it, especially the embarrassing portions." Bell glanced toward the study. "And Charles Fenwick? Free to go. And the handwriting?" Wimsey picked up the old letter once more. "The handwriting remains innocent." Bell laughed. "After all this, handwriting has been blamed for murder before. It is a tiresome habit." He returned the letter to its envelope. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the last of the household lamps burned steadily, illuminating a room in which a dead man's papers had finally ceased to accuse the wrong person. Wimsey slipped his gloves into his pocket. "Come, Inspector. We have exhausted the ink." The servants moved quietly through their duties. The silver was polished. The breakfast fire burned. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened and shut. Lord Peter Wimsey stood in the entrance hall waiting for his car. Inspector Harold Bell came down the staircase carrying a folder. "I have finished the report. My condolences." Bell smiled. "It is quite respectable. Then I am doubly sorry." Bell handed him the folder. "I have included the chronology exactly as you gave it." "Excellent. Chronology is an unappreciated branch of detective work. Most criminals regard time as though it were a decorative border around the facts." Bell leaned against the banister. "I keep thinking about the handwriting." "You should not." "Why?" "Because handwriting is a singularly vain witness. It is forever insisting that it knows people." Bell opened the folder. "You really think the handwriting alone exposed her?" "No." The answer came immediately. The handwriting exposed the mistake. The chronology exposed the opportunity. The bell exposed the staging. The window exposed the theater. The blotting paper exposed the preparation. And the old letter supplied the family connection. Bell nodded. "And Charles Fenwick?" "A fortunate, innocent man. He was nearly arrested." "Yes. Does that trouble you?" "Very much." Bell looked surprised. "I thought you enjoyed puzzles." "I enjoy puzzles. I dislike what people do to one another while solving them." Then Charles Fenwick appeared at the end of the corridor. He carried a small suitcase. "Lord Peter, Mr. Fenwick." "I am leaving." "So I gathered." Charles hesitated. "I wanted to thank you." "Please don't. Gratitude is an awkward possession. One never knows where to put it." "I mean it." "I know." Charles glanced toward the study. "Will they keep the house?" "I imagine so." "I don't think I can ever come back." Wimsey studied him. "That may be wise." Charles looked almost relieved. "Do you think my name will be cleared?" "Officially, yes, and unofficially. My dear fellow, unofficial opinions are like houseflies. One cannot prevent them entering through open windows." Charles smiled faintly. "I suppose that is true." He turned to leave, then stopped. "There is one thing." "Yes? Why did you suspect the note?" Wimsey's eyes became mildly amused. "I did not suspect the note." "The handwriting, then?" "No." Charles waited. Wimsey smiled. "I suspected the convenience of it." Charles frowned. "Is that all?" "Convenience is often the most suspicious quality possessed by evidence." Charles nodded slowly. "Goodbye, Lord Peter. Goodbye." The front door closed. Reverend Lionel Marsh arrived from the village. He carried only his hat and an expression of weary contemplation. "I heard that Eleanor had confessed." "She has." Marsh looked toward the study. "Edmund would have been satisfied. Would he?" The vicar considered. "He wanted the truth. Most people do, provided it is not inconvenient." Marsh smiled sadly. "What will happen to the old manuscript?" "That depends upon the trustees, and Thomas Vale's reputation." Wimsey glanced at the envelope in his hand. "That may finally receive justice." Marsh sighed. 18 years. Yes. Such a long time for a piece of paper. Paper is remarkably patient. He handed the envelope back. "Keep it." The vicar accepted it carefully. "Do so, but label it accurately." "How?" "Evidence that the dead are occasionally acquitted by the living." The vicar laughed. When he had gone, Bell returned to the hall. "The car is ready." Then civilization beckons. Wimsey put on his hat. Before leaving, he looked once more toward the study. The door stood open now. Bell followed his gaze. Strange, isn't it? What? How different it looks. Rooms have no conscience. No, they merely remember what people have done in them. Bell looked thoughtful. Do you suppose Eleanor will ever regret it? Wimsey adjusted his gloves. Regret is a curious commodity. It is often purchased after the opportunity for return has expired. He stepped outside. The air smelled of wet earth and leaves. A patch of sunlight lay across the drive. Bell followed. You have not quoted Shakespeare, have I not? Not once. Wimsey looked offended. I have been surrounded by sufficient tragedy without adding Shakespeare to it. They reached the motor car. Wimsey opened the door, then paused. There is, however, one quotation suitable to the occasion. Bell waited. Wimsey smiled. The truth will out. Shakespeare. Quite, though in this instance the truth required a little assistance from a bad clock, a troublesome bell, and a lady whose handwriting was more honest than she was. He climbed into the car. Bell glanced sideways. And the title? The title? Your case. What shall we call it? Wimsey considered the matter. The handwriting that exposed a murderer. Bell laughed. That sounds almost theatrical. Then it is perfectly suitable for a murder committed by someone who mistook life for a stage. The car moved slowly down the drive. Wimsey looked back once at Blackthorn Hall. The house stood silent beneath the pale morning sky, its windows reflecting the clouds, its chimneys motionless, its secrets finally reduced to evidence. For once, it looked almost innocent in the morning light. He took a cigar from his case. Bell, driving, glanced sideways. After breakfast, after murder, Inspector, one should never be too rigid about breakfast. He lit the cigar. The smoke curled toward the roof of the car and vanished into the morning air. Behind them, the house grew smaller. Ahead lay London, traffic, newspapers, luncheon appointments, and the thousand ordinary absurdities by which civilization disguises its proximity to chaos. Wimsey settled back. A most instructive case, Bell smiled. You mean unpleasant? I mean both. The distinction is chiefly a matter of upholstery. And with that, Lord Peter Wimsey disappeared down the wet country road, leaving Blackthorn Hall to its quiet rooms, its corrected history, and one old letter which had waited 18 years to tell the truth. If you enjoyed the case, tell us in the comments which clue fooled you most, or whether you suspected Eleanor before Wimsey revealed the handwriting. And if you would like another journey into a country house where politeness conceals murder, subscribe and join us for the next mystery.